recently spent time on vacation with various members of my family up in Ontario, Canada. We were a group of 8 adults and 2 children, my niece Natalie, who is 3, and my nephew Andrew, who is 1. We were together for an entire week on a remote island up in Lake of the Woods, where the primary activities consisted of fishing, reading, eating, and sleeping. It was a generally relaxing trip, and I enjoyed spending time with members of my family that I do not get to see very often, the children in particular. Natalie especially is a very bright child who is quick to laugh and loves to give hugs and is eager to try anything for the first time. Unfortunately, this very bright child also turned into an absolute terror at bedtime. She became a screaming, bawling mess as soon as she spotted her pajamas, and many nights would yell herself to sleep as the rest of us tried our best to continue our leisurely vacation activities in spite of her temper tantrums. It is tempting to think that 3-year-olds are the only ones who act like this. But I think that if we really take an honest look at ourselves, we will recognize that we too harbor such qualities within each of us. Today's gospel is a divisive text. It reads as an either-or scenario that appears to demand that we choose sides, or at the very least, make sure that we are standing on the right side of the dividing line between the wheat and the weeds. In this parable, the master sowed good seed in his field, but while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. The text begs the question, which one are you? The wheat or the weeds? It certainly seems like the right answer is obvious. In this us versus them narrative, surely we are the wheat, right? We know what wheat does. It bends gracefully in the wind, is used to make bread, produces good things. We are sitting here in church on a beautiful summer morning when we could easily be doing a million other things with our time. We are right here, using our gifts and talents to provide for others, volunteering for pads, donating food to the Glen food pantry, teaching ESL classes. We are making bread, so to speak. So of course, we are the wheat. And most of the time, we will do anything to get rid of those nasty weeds that surround us. The truth is, though, that in spite of the many good deeds we do every day, we do plenty that is harmful and invasive as well. I challenge you to take a quick assessment of your actions just over this last week. Did you lose your temper when that person cut you off on the freeway? Did you seek to intentionally hurt someone you love simply to prove a point? Did you take credit for someone else's work at your place of employment so that you would receive the praise and attention? There is a healthy dose of stubborn toddler inside each of us, or weedy qualities, if you prefer, as much as we would like to think that we are 100% wheat. Martin Luther realized this too. He coined the phrase sinner and saint to describe our naturally sinful selves dwelling alongside and within our saved selves. He wrote, "We are God's children, and yet sinners. We are acceptable and do not do enough. All this is the work of faith, firmly grounded in God's grace." But if you ask where faith and confidence may be found or whence they come, it is certainly the most necessary thing to know. First, without any doubt, it does not come from your works or from your merits, but only from Jesus Christ, freely promised and freely given. This is the beauty of grace, that in spite of our brokenness, we are restored to wholeness through the life and death of Jesus Christ. In this way, our gospel text for today is not an either-or story. It is a both-and story. We are both sinner and saint, weed and wheat, broken and restored. We come to this table each week to receive anew this promise of God's goodness, to break bread with one another and worship with one another. We continue to come here to this place, but we do not come here just as a refuge, as a hiding place where we can screw our eyes shut tightly and count to 3 and imagine that all will be perfect when we open our eyes again. If we envision ourselves and our congregation as weed-free, then we are only fooling ourselves, because our world is full of weeds, and we are called to remain rooted right there alongside them. When the laborers notice that the weeds have grown up alongside the wheat and ask the master if they should uproot them, the master says no. He does not even suggest that the laborers sow good seed again in another field and keep watch over it to ensure that an enemy will not come to sow weeds in this field too. No, Jesus does not tell us to flee in the face of adversity. We are to stay grounded where we are, even when it appears that our fields are being invaded with undesirable people or issues or events. And noticing the weeds around us naturally makes us feel uncomfortable. I know that I felt uncomfortable sitting in the next room, trying to enjoy the last few pages of my novel with my niece Natalie kicking and screaming down the hall. But I did not run away from her. I could not. Because even when she transformed herself into a complete and total terror, I loved her. I wanted her to feel my love for her, wanted her to know that in spite of her screams, she was loved. Because this is the gift that God gives us. And this is the gift that we are called to share with the weedy world around us, a world that is screaming with rockets and bombs, kicking the poor and marginalized, and crying out at the destruction of God's creation. We are called to bear witness to the goodness of God, the wheat that we believe grows within us and in everyone, in spite of such weeds. And this is hard. As Paul writes, this suffering makes us groan. We groan with either the likes of labor pains or inward groans while we wait for the redemption of our bodies. And neither could be called very enjoyable, but we have hope that these pains are nothing to be compared with the glory that will be revealed to us. It is in these situations that some of our most weedy qualities actually turn out to be awfully handy. The ability to act with determination and persistence, to remain focused on the ultimate goal, to speak boldly and with courage. I was surprised to learn at a community organizing training led by the Metro Industrial Areas Foundation a few weeks ago that a key personality trait of all successful community organizers is anger. We discussed how anger is typically perceived as a bad quality in our culture today, but in the world of organizing, anger is considered fuel. fuel to fight for justice, fairness, and equality. I'm still not completely convinced that anger is the best word to describe this fuel, but I can certainly get behind the idea of passion. Passion is a strong feeling or emotion that can drive you forward and keep you going. And we have much that we are passionate about. Here at Faith, people are passionate about nature, softball, family and friends, dance, photography, learning, making stuff, gardening, animals, music, history, golf, fishing, even beachcombing for shark teeth, just to name a few. People here are also passionate about God and the Lutheran Church and support a wide range of causes, from the ELCA malaria campaign to Faith's own prayer shawl ministry to the Teen Parent Connection and the Glen Band and Orchestra. Our passion fuels our actions, and hopefully our faith is a large part of where that passion comes from. We can be passionate, we can support so many causes because we are honest with ourselves about our true identity as both wheat and weed, confident that as children of God, we are called to live in a world right alongside those things planted by the evil one. We live in a world that wants to divide us, to pit us against one another, to draw up boundaries and definitions and labels to separate us and distinguish us from one another, right versus wrong. And even though God's kingdom is beyond our understanding, we have hope in God's promise of goodness. We are children of God, heirs of Christ. We have hope that although we have made mistakes, have sinned, have thrown our own temper tantrums time and time again, continue to have those weed qualities thrive inside us, we are loved and called to remain firmly in this divided world, bearing witness to Christ and the love of God. God is calling us to work passionately for justice, not for judgment, to work passionately with one another to build up, rather than against one another to tear down, to passionately spread the good news beyond these four walls. We are simultaneously saint and sinner, perfect and imperfect, wheat and weed. Rejoice in that diversity. Step forth into the world with hope and remain there. Let anyone with ears listen.